What's happening everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back to a new review. Today we are checking out one of the most affordable action cameras that can record in real 4K at 30 frames per second. So this right here, it's called the EKEN H9R Plus, and this camera is using the Umbrella A12 processor, therefore it can record in real 4K at 30 frames per second. But of course you can always do 1080p at 60 frames per second or 720 at 120 frames per second if you need more fluidity in your videos or if you plan to record in slow motion. So you can buy this camera for between $70 and $80, and that's a pretty good price for a camera that can record in real 4K, but this camera is missing a very important feature, well, at least for me anyways. So we don't get image stabilization at any resolution, so it doesn't matter if you're recording in 4K or 1080p, there is no image stabilization with this camera. And if you're walking or if you're running or anything like that, your footage will look a bit shaky. Now you can always use a gimbal if you have a gimbal for an action camera, but I know that not everyone has a gimbal, and after you spend $80 on a camera, you don't exactly want to spend another $150 for a gimbal. Alright, so starting with a very quick unboxing, this comes in a very good looking box, and the first thing we see is basically the camera and the waterproof case, and the waterproof case is good to up to 30 meters in the water. Now, I haven't exactly been diving with it, but I did have the waterproof case in waters and there was no water going inside. Aside from that, we are going to find the user manual. The user manual is in English and it's got a bunch of information. And aside from that, we're going to find some mounts and stickers so you can technically mount the camera anywhere. Now, depending where you're buying the camera, you may get the second battery and also the remote control. Now, keep in mind that the remote control is not waterproof, it's only splash proof. And with the remote control, you can start and stop recordings and of course take pictures. The camera is mostly made out of plastic and it looks very similar to an older GoPro, so you can probably use any accessories that you had for a previous action camera. So on the front there we have a couple of LEDs, we have the power button that's also a mode button, the lens, and at the top we have the OK or the recording button. Moving to the left hand side of the camera, there we have the micro USB charging port, we have the HDMI out and the slot for the SD card. So this camera can take SD cards up to 64 gigs, and I did try a couple of 64 gig SD cards and they both seem to work great, and I'm gonna leave links in the video's description just in case you don't know what SD card to get for your camera. So this camera can be used while it's charging, so you can technically attach a power bank to it, and this way you're not gonna be running out of power. And the camera can also do time lapses at the press of a button, and that's very important because some cheaper action cameras that I've tried in the past cannot do that, and this was an example of a time lapse that I've done with this camera. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a driving mode, and that means that the camera is not gonna turn on and off every time you turn on and off the car, so you may not be able to use this as a dash cam. On the other side of the camera, we have the Wi-Fi button. So this camera can make a Wi-Fi network and you can connect to that Wi-Fi network with your smartphone, and then you can see everything that the camera sees right on your smartphone. Of course, you're gonna have to install an app on your smartphone, but once you have the app installed, you can basically change all the settings for the camera right from the app, and you can also see everything that you have recorded on the camera. And moving to the bottom of the camera, there we have a little plastic door that covers the 1050 mAh battery. So first things first, charging that battery takes about an hour and a half, and on one charge you can record for about an hour if you're recording in 1080p or about 40 minutes if you're recording in 4K. Now, you probably noticed that we don't have a 1/4 inch screw hole at the bottom of the camera, but at least we have a bracket that comes in the box, so you can basically attach that and then attach that to a tripod or something like that. So it would have been nice to see a 1/4 inch screw hole, but it is what it is. And lastly, on the back of the camera, we have a 2-inch screen that doesn't look anything spectacular, doesn't have the best viewing angles, but it's good enough so you can actually frame your shots. So for the price, I can't really complain. Alright, so this camera cannot take an external microphone, so every time you're recording something, you're gonna have to rely on the internal microphone. And next, we're gonna check out a couple of clips so you can see how the internal microphone sounds. What's happening everyone, this is a quick microphone test to the EKEN H9R Plus. So I'm currently recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, and I'm also holding the camera in my hand. Now keep in mind that it is a bit windy around here, and you may also be able to hear some cars because there is traffic that way, but other than that you should only be able to hear my voice. So under these conditions, this is how the microphone recordings from this action camera sound. And for our second microphone test to the EKEN H9R Plus, once again I'm recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. I'm walking and there is a bit of wind, but not much, and I'm also using the gimbal because if I wouldn't be using the gimbal, of course the image would be a bit shaky. So this is how the microphone sounds under these conditions. And as you've heard for yourself, the internal microphone is not mind-blowing, but definitely decent for a camera around $70 to $80, so can't really complain at that price. Alright, so next we're gonna check out some daytime recordings that I've done with this camera, and I have to say I was quite surprised to see the quality of the recordings, mostly for daytime. Now keep in mind that I did use a gimbal, and every time I use the gimbal, you're gonna be able to see that at the bottom of the screen, and whenever I didn't use a gimbal, well, the footage is a bit shaky. So let's check those out.
There's some like good stuff, man. You see something?
And as you've seen for yourself, the daytime recordings look really good and probably the best that I've seen for any camera around $70. But too bad that we don't get any type of image stabilization. That would have been so awesome to get. Alright, next we are moving on to some nighttime recordings, and of course the quality of the nighttime recordings isn't gonna be as good as the daytime one, but it's still decent for the price. So let's check those out. And as you've seen for yourself, the nighttime recordings aren't spectacular, but definitely decent enough for this price. Of course, since this is a camera, it can also take pictures, and the picture quality is good as long as you have plenty of light. When you don't have plenty of light, as always, the pictures become a bit blurry and a bit grainy, but nothing out of the ordinary. And lastly, using the camera is fairly simple. So we have the power button on the front of the camera, and that's also the mode button. So from that button you can switch in between the picture taking mode, the video recording mode, photo lapses, video lapses, and of course you can access the settings for the camera. But since this is an entry-level camera, we don't exactly have that many settings in there. So of course you can change the video resolution, and as I said, you can select 4K at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 60 or 720p at 120 frames per second. You can change the resolution for pictures and so on. There are also some languages available, but as I said, yeah, this camera doesn't have that many options or settings in there, so don't expect anything crazy. And it's time to conclude this video. So for an entry-level camera around $70 to $80, the video quality for daytime recordings is really good, probably better than some other more expensive cameras that I've seen in the past. but we don't get that image stabilization, and that may be a deal breaker for a lot of people. But other than that, the camera is pretty good for the price. Alright guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, press that like button, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.